phone. So
I'm the saxophonist, but that's going to come after the talk, unfortunately.
So with this shambolic introduction, we are here live from the basement of UKS, and in the latest addition to our UKS exhibition infrastructure, which is tonight. It's our studio, and it's also the bar, designed and conceptualized by Bruno Su. As you can see, he has provided us with the name, which was also the title of his exhibition here at UKS, way back in the pre-corona days, in March of this year. And this, of course, also this is a celebration of the opening of the bar, and it's also a celebration of the UKS 99th birthday, because UKS was founded at Café Engebrecht down at Bankplassen 99 years ago today. And what better occasion to also celebrate our past 4 years with our amazing director and the newly minted Dr. Dall of København's Universitet, and our beloved Rhea of UKS. And it's very fitting that we are here in a new format of socializing, and in a way maybe a departure or an expansion on the minibar concept, which we have put this talk into, and the expanded bar speakeasy environment, where we will speak easy for the next 45 minutes or so. And this bar, both the minibar and this speakeasy, are places to socialize, and it's a very welcome and fitting addition to UKS, because it was also founded as an organization and a meeting place where artists could get together and socialize with like-minded artists. Because artists are a very sociable bunch, I would say, but the artistic practice is also a lonely practice oftentimes, and these occasions to get together are very welcome, and I think I hope that it's a welcome occasion again for you folks watching back home. So yeah, this serves as an intro, I guess, to introduce the format that we are meeting under tonight, the mini bar, which was a new addition to UKS, brought by you.
Yeah.
And would you care first to remind me if I've forgotten anything in this introduction? And then secondly, to talk a bit about minibar.
I think you've done very well, sir. And thank you for. I think it's really appreciated that you've taken this time to talk about the last 4 years, and we can talk about the last 99 years too. Which is also, because this marks the end of my term as the director here, and obviously being a director for 4 years feels like a very, it has for me felt like a long and very invested and also very short in both ways period of time. So it's great to get to speak a little bit about some of these things that has happened throughout this time, and it was fun to prepare for this with you, talking through some of the formats and also looking through some of the pictures, because of course, like what happened in 2017 stays in 2017, and I don't remember everything. any longer. But sure, I think the minibar, to come back to your question, the minibar was one of the first formats I really thought about, and it of course had to do with the very fact that, as you said, UKS was founded actually at a bar. It was before it even was an institution, it was a society of people meeting every second week, having fun, getting, I imagine, really drunk, and also, sharing thoughts about artistic practice, their artwork, even the economics of that, and it felt really important coming to UKS to retain some of that energy. And I think there's obviously a danger in the professionalization of the artists, the institutions we know, to the extent that everything happens under the hard light of bright tungsten, neon, or fluorescent lights, and that sets a certain tone. And so I had this idea that we could, with UKS, when I started the program, climb back to some of the informalities, some of the fun, some of the whispers in the corners of friendships that happen, or even there could be UKS children out there somewhere. And so this idea that an institution is not just a formalized place where you stand alone in front of an artwork, but it's a social platform. It's a platform, it's a forum, it's a place to meet. And so in that sense, it's really wonderful to be in the bar, because the minibar happened upstairs, and there was this long, I've been thinking about for very long, how to employ every little nook and cranny of UKS as a particular geography, a particular space in St. Olavs gate 3. And one of the long-standing wishes was for the minibar to slowly crawl into the basement and become even more easy spoken, speak easy, and in that sense to allow for a particular kind of intimacy that I think institutions don't often allow to happen, and that can be thrown out with the bath water the moment you focus on the grand solo shows and create a brouhaha around that, which has its own right, and we will talk about that in a bit, but to have an elasticity in the institution.
I think there has one of the big shifts from for UKS as a society and as a community of artists. I guess looking back now, we're at the 99th anniversary, but we're also preparing very much for the 100th anniversary, which means that we are looking back very much these days, and trying to pinpoint the identity of the institutions at particular points in time. And there was something maybe that happened in the late 90s, I guess, or maybe especially around the move to the Lakkegata space in year 2000, where there was a demand, there was a wish on the part of the members to become a more professionalized institution, and also that the director should be more of a professional curator who could help both the artists making their exhibitions and also to make a more higher profile program. And you're the last in the line of directors who have shown, I would say, very solid and very personal style of leadership, or given a flavor to this institution, which though remains an artist-run institution. to do a belated Netflix style, very late credit on the screen. I'm Stefan Hanviken, an artist and the chair of the UKS board. And the board are all artists and of course all very invested in both the politics of being an artist, as of presenting or working as an artist in society today, but also of owning and managing and running in a sense an exhibition space. But the choice is to professionalize this by hiring a director. Then to make this into more of an open question, how do you see the role of the director in making sort of the vision for an artist-run space relevant and giving voice to the exhibitions over these past 4 years?
That's such a good question. I think I think it's to just kind of walk back a little bit. It's true that there's been a shift in UK's history from this structure being artist run in a traditional sense, kunstnerdrevet, which basically means that the institution would be run by artists and program would be decided by the artist in the board, to the board, as you're saying, delegating the directorial mandate to just not, instead of just having you could say a secretary and staff that would still be super involved, but to call the lead of the staff a director and put artistic leadership to that role too. And I see that as, it's been, for me, coming to UKS, one of the things I had thought a lot about was this whole question of how to work and how do we work together, and what does that mean. And I think working with an artist board makes that question even more valid in a way. I think that's been one of our prime discussions. How do we give, you could say, best practice? How do we give the best conditions to the artists that come in the door here? And I think that's really that's a real validation to the artist board and that collaboration with the director curator. And then I think of course there's this whole question of, if there's an artist board that's themselves active artists, invested in the scene at large in Norway, the international scene, how then to and you're the director, how then to create also a program, and in part of the program is open call based, and I think for me, and obviously that has been an ongoing, that's of course like an ongoing question, but one of the things I've been working with for very long has been to talk about an artist-centered way of curating. And in that sense, you could almost flip it around and say that my interest is not so much creating a kind of classical idea of a curator as a top-down figure, but it's much more to think about how the artistic practices that are invited in, and again coming back to this question of how to work, how the artistic practices invited into this space can get the best conditions, and in that sense expand their practices, expand the idea also of what the institution can be, and by way of that developing both new formats and new conceptual ideas. And that's really been, I think, one of the primary functions of my directorship, to try and push that. And that, of course, to create that kind of experimental environment, there needs to be a high level of trust. So that to create the grounds for that kind of collaborative spirit between artist and institution, there needs to be particular level of care, a particular level of mutuality. There needs to be malleability on the side of the institution. And that's one of the things that I've been very concerned with. It's when we have these constructions, like a Balta of like 99 years, how do we then make sure that it keeps on being experimental? How can it keep on turning? How can it keep on changing? And that's, one of the things we've, managed to even put into the graphic design, these turning letters, the rotating old branch that was drawn by the Cassia to Refsum, I think, in 1921. So in a way, taking the very, very old, how can an institution have a long-standing identity that has to do with the idea of, how artists work and work both as a union, in a sense, a membership organization for those rights, and also work for that in practice. And how does that then, at the same time, not manifests itself as a completely rigid, dying elephant, but as something that's alive and changing all the time? And that's a fun thing, because we come back then to this whack question that then we're at the 99th year, and it's only now that we start knowing what the hell happened, because no one cared to, in that role of things and events changing, no one cared to archive UKS. And I think that's in a weird way, that's a healthy thing. That's because UKS has stayed vibrant and turning and changing and, malleable. And that's one of the things I've been trying to take into the ethos of the institution. And so creating a program has been about creating, relations and collaborations and how we work, and via that to push, obviously, both, solo practices further into a conversation, but also thinking about a much, much bigger environment, a much bigger social and artistic, scene of art scene in Norway, and how to and abroad, and how to include that in, for instance, different elastic formats as the minibar, the Shhhhhhh. And then, of course, this is the beautiful, magnificent, epitome of that, because then when an artist ends up, interjecting himself into our minibar format, hijacking its name, it becoming the Shhhhhhh, then that whole thing of artist-centered curating feels like it's really working.
It's the malleability test is passed then with flying colors. We hope. Yeah.
We hope.
And I think it's also an interesting, I think, ethos for a curator, because the notion of a curator has sort of been dumbed down through popular culture, I would say, to someone who makes choices.
Yeah.
And of course, at UKS, with regards to the program, there's a jury of artists who makes choices on about the programming, like which artists get to have shows. But when looking at an institution's practice as a kind of work that is ongoing, and that's a kind of presence in a community, it means that those choices become like less the focus of the curator's work, but it's the daily operation.
Yeah, and it's the collaboration with the artist, and I like this. I know we're not talking about Michael Jackson today, or like any longer, but there is this wonderful Spike Lee documentary about the bad record when that turned 25. So another little anniversary celebration, where Spike Lee interviews Quincy Jones, who's the famous producer of everything Michael Jackson for at least those years. And Quincy Jones talks about what he does and what his role is in the collaboration. And he says, and of course it's a standard, say that, the curator is a producer, the curator is a ethnographer, the curator is an archivist, and blah, 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 blah. So say curator is producer, right? And in this idea of Quincy Jones, he says, like, what he does, or what he did, was that he helped Michael Jackson get to the 34th floor, and then to make the jump And I really think that's part of the curatorial ethos here. I mean, we're not killing anyone, luckily, but we're trying to make people fly. And I think when you're a young artist and you meet institutions at large, and you do that and you're often asked to send in projects, you have this vision of an institution and what it wants. And I am sorry to say, but I do think that a lot of institutions are, at least from the outside, regarded as quite conservative. So artists would then deem, something that you can see, like something that can be boxed in, whether it's a thing or like a very easily told tale. And I think that is a way of working that underestimates both the artistic process and what institutions can do. I think we can do much more than that. And that's why working with a practice-based open call has been very different. And that's been inviting artists into a conversation about what the institution can do, not what it is, but what it can be for that particular artist. And of course, developing a whole process and hopefully getting to that 34th floor and then making that jump instead of, prejudging things and in way of that, maybe completely halting the whole experiment.
I remember seeing the first open call for this practice-based application, which I guess there wasn't a big deal made out of this shift in the open call. But I remember, as a lot of artists are, like being very sensitive to the wording in all these applications that we have to read and we have to fill out. Throughout the year. I remember feeling that this is some kind of a kind of monumental change in a way, in both not asking the artist to sort of project a new proposal onto the gallery space in this fictitious and quite sort of ungrounded way, but instead like showing an interest in what the artist has done up to that point and where the trajectory of the career or the interests or outside community.
Yeah.
And I think this comes from both, I think, from a practical consideration of how the artists best spend their time, and to put all this like unpaid work into writing proposals of shows that will never happen. Like when there are 4 out of 400 being selected, then there's an immense amount of unpaid labor that goes to waste, basically. Whereas this sort of reflection and presentation of your own practice, I think should be very integral to artists' work, even though it's not completely labor-free, and it's and application writing it's still in what looks somewhere as a utopian Norwegian artist context. Application writing is still not billable hours, but I think this comes from an idea, also from the board and from the members, that UKS as an institution should in a way practice what we preach in a way as a way of fulfilling sort of political ideals for an exhibition space. But I think what made it so satisfying for me, reading this open call and this call for sort of a dialogue around like a practice-based description of the work, is that there's more of a correspondence between what's being shown in a way and how the institution would show it, and what the expectations are on either side, both the artist and the institution. That there's an opening for a negotiation about the impact of the work and the expectations. And I think it's I think now it's easy to say that as a chair of UKS that everything UKS does is immensely successful and well thought out. But I think that if like taking if you take art seriously as a serious practice in your life for artists, then I think this is the way of going about making exhibitions. This is by way of congratulating you on this innovation.
Thanks, but I agree. I mean, it's not my innovation alone. I mean, it does come from the board in the sense that, and that of course comes from this whole idea that, you know, the immense amounts of hours of labor happening, you know, in writing projects, of dreaming up projects, and then, you know, not getting to the invitation from the institution is of course one of the very redundant and weird things that goes around in these, you know, Scandinavian systems where there's quite a lot of project-based applications happening. But of course you could also compare it to, you know, a good old gig economy. This idea that, you know, you always have to, you're only an artist until your next show. And I think that's in itself an ideology I don't subscribe to at all. I think, and that's really important, that, you know, UKS is not a place just for projects. It's a place for practices. It's a place to discuss practices as well. And we started this series of talks, How to Practice. But just to say that I think the idea that it's a practice you show, that it's not, that it's a process, and that the work is part of a process, of course, like puts out an entirely different premise. Because you don't, in that sense, have to, you know, show the be-all, end-all. Being, you know, part of creating an exhibition at UKS can be, you know, the fifth in a series of 10, or it could be like, you don't have to think of this. There's this weird thing of authorship and exclusivity that happens in the art world, where we all want to sit on our own little, you know, beautiful sort of peak. And I think that that's unhealthy, because it doesn't match how an artistic practice develops from almost never from nothing, never from a blank paper, but is always in, you know, development. So that's, and then of course the other part of this is that when the institution goes into these processes with the artists, it's no longer, you know, a dead shell. It's also a way of rethinking institutional formats entirely. It's to try and think about how institutions can act differently. And I think that that's, you know, highly political, in the sense that, you know, how cultural institutions are built basically, you know, trickles up, trickles down into the National Museum. And then, you know, that's how, you know, things are archived, cultural memory is created. So it has a constitutional effect on society. And it might be that UKS is tiny, but UKS has been throughout its 99 years an incubator of new formats. So we should keep on doing that. And the new formats don't, I think, happen in sort of curating alone or in artistic practices alone. Ideally, those formats are, you know, the institution trying to meet the practice. And, you know, on the other hand, the artist seeing, how can I change this institution, and by way of that make it a much better platform. And I think that comes back to then, of course, the way Bruno Tsu in the Shhhhhhh, so we can talk about Bruno and his show that happened at UKS like almost a year ago at this point, how he simply decided to, you know, make a show where he made UKS work for him throughout the time of the exhibition. So the exhibition consisted of these beautiful velvet walls, and then a lot of stories about the UKS archive that mixed with his stories that were told by invigilators, gallery sitters, employees at UKS, and that becoming, you know, an infiltration of the institution, in a way maxing out on how much can then the artist really change and insert his, her, their stories into, say, 99 years of history.
And I think there's this balance as well between the members and these peaks. Like there's still to put all that work into each exhibition to make it sort of an ideal working environment for both the artists and the institution. It means also a departure from one of the like modes that UKS has used in the past, is to provide space for a lot of artists to have shows, like to get another notch on their CV in a way, which is also, it's a service that's highly in demand with artists, but which doesn't necessarily provide much in terms of artistic or career growth. Let's say. And I think in being this good example as an institution, like to try to approach this perfect institution for artists to work in. There's also been like political work. I feel like I should also say as chair now to make sure that the access to making shows and to being able to start other institutions or initiatives has been one of the important roles that UKS has had in the cultural economy in Norway in the past 10 years.
And I guess it's really it's really important to say that UKS starts reducing the amounts. There's a quite drastic reduction in the amount of shows annually, which more or less syncs with the moment UKS has helped in terms of infrastructure, setting up a funding scheme for artist-run spaces. So in a way, thinking that UKS as a political function has been able to broaden out and open up for many more mushrooming, smaller platforms. And then that, of course, allows, thinking that then in return allows for UKS to, and should, analyze the scene and then itself as an institution take on a different role.
I think I had in my notes a sort of intermission of sorts here, which would be, it feels like it's wrong to let you go after these 4 years without also sort of giving at least saying the names of the artists who had the solo shows, because it's also a way of, we are talking about how the institution operates, about the work that goes into each exhibition, but the way that the work goes into those shows is, of course, by way of artists and by way of collaboration, I think, and co-creating. So I'll have to consult my notes here, but starting at the top, it's Eirik Sæther and Tora Dolven Balke, Georgia Gardner Gray, Constance Tenvik, Nora Young, Natalie Price Hafslund, Nora Turatu, Sandra Mujinga, Atichaya Vantiang, Martin Sæther, Özgür Khan, Mikael Birkic, Victoria Pilin, Bruno So, Eli Maria Lundgaard, Josefin Arnell og Ayat Gali Tulebekk, som who opens. I switched into Norwegian there, reading all those familiar names. And then it's Ayat Gali Tulebekk who opens his show and your grand finale here at UKS next Friday.
It's nice to hear those names. You forgot Nora Turatu.
I didn't know.
No, you maybe did
I think I got her before Sandra Mujinga.
Oh shit! But she was wrong. There was the wrong order. I thought.
Okay, maybe I put her in the wrong
She's
place.
after Sandra. I'm. But I was thinking that's an essential. Both her and Pia shows were very good examples of how this collaborative thinking can work, and how it can make the exhibition space or the institution entirely turn itself upside down. Because with Nora, who has this performative practice where she goes on into these rants of they're pretty well studied, but still of say 20-25 minutes. She collects quotes from the internet and onwards. We decided to simply make that, which is then something that a lot of exhibition spaces have, battled with how they could even show, and then end up showing prints or other. We ended up making the exhibition as simply the 25 minutes of performance every day, and then Nora came here and lived at or close by in Oslo for a whole month to then perform her exhibition on an everyday basis, and that of course turned exhibition time into, or institutional opening hours into, a different rhythm, and it changed everything because we were suddenly hosting this backstage goddess of things, who then had, that we were providing, making sure that she would be okay to do that enormously hard labor. And another example would be with Pia, or with Apitaya Van Chang. We did this also change of opening hours, which seems like such a a rigid thing in many institutions, that you have to be open from say 12 to 5 or 2 to 6 or whatever every day. But we changed the opening hours as well to meet the nautical dusk, so that the exhibition basically would open when it got dark, and of course would open earlier and earlier as we kind of came into deep winter in Norway, and it would then have this natural rhythm of the environment that would be taken on into the institution, which then cued into Pia's exhibition that had to do with landscapes and her place of origin and onwards. But that was just to say that just to give some examples, and sorry to you did not forget them, Nora.
If I did, I'm very sorry.
Yes.
We've made good on Nora now.
No, I think so too.
I hope. And this like the artists going in and discussing the conditions that they are operating under, as a way of maybe moving forward in their practice, or maybe also opening possibilities or new avenues in this also kind of, I would say, like increasingly sort of streamlined and professionalized idea of what an artist's practice should look like is, I think, very like it's also like conceptually and artistically a good help and a good way to engage artists, I would say. And another way where that comes into play is in this other format that goes on the side of the main exhibitions, called Young, Dumb and Broke, which is a kind of irreverent way of speaking about established and successful artists. But I think it serves us all well to remember that everyone has at some point been young, dumb, and broke, for longer or shorter. But how did that format come into being?
Well, first of all, I am a fan of Khalid, who has done this fantastic album called American Teen. And I became a fan because I was at Roskilde Festival. And I was suddenly at this pop concert with my sister, who is 4 years younger. And I'm getting a very old lady, which also makes me call this place the Old Lady Society. But I was with my sister, and we're in this enormous crowd of people a few years ago in front of the next biggest, second biggest stage. And there's this, American pop artist playing tunes that everyone around us know by heart. And we're having, it's just this weird, blissful moment of seeing, youth, and understanding that I am old, and also understanding that, there's this, there's something happening that is, to some extent out of reach. And that made me, wish for speaking about the kind of youth that we project into UKS, beyond, of course, singing Young, Dumb and Broke, the beautiful song for myself, to myself, walking back and forth to work, and wanting to point to point to how, you know, all artists at some point have been young, dumb, and broke, or at least one of the three,
Yeah.
young or dumb or broke, or and that there is a deferred value here. Like UKS saying something like incubator, it sounds like startup tech, and it's a terrible sort of neoliberal language to get into. But I think UKS has a particular potential to actually, grow things and help things, or at least support things in growth. And by things, I mean practices or voices or utterances, and that can be in the board, artists coming into the board suddenly becoming very vocal in the public debate, but it can also be artistic practices being presented in shows here or in talks here, and thinking that has, of course, that doesn't have the Khalid kind of pop singing green stage Roskilde effect right away, but it will. And that's what we have to believe in. That's why the ecosystem of, an art scene works. It's because there are these platforms that, start in the grassroots, and that lifts, voices into a bigger public conversation. And that's where, Matt Mullican has become, incredibly famous. But his 1974 show, which is, the most monumental thing he's ever done, was seen by very few people in a very new space in New York called Artist Space. It was super important, and he's still doing some of the same things. And, Elizabeth Ralph that we're showing right now, also actually a 1974 piece, just to be, I don't know why we landed in 1974, but it's a flag. She's still working with flags and the concept of the flag and the nation and the ecology and, our, global world. And she started that back in 74, and no one, at that point could project that she would become like the grande dame, or one of them at least, of Norwegian art. So it's about also looking at, I think, and that's really important for people. It's in a way, a very easy way, by way, easy in the sense that it's not speakeasy, but it's a tiny vitrine of, I think, 1 meter by 1 meter, and putting a work into that vitrine with some kind of frequency every half year, every 9 months, that comes from a now very famous artist that once was young and broke and potentially also a little dumb. Another artist we showed was Bjarne Melgaard. That's that talks about, hopefully, where all these artists and all these practices that come through UKS today are going.
We're the best music, as they say. And I think this also goes to another one of the successful formats. And I guess it could be the title of our conversation today as well, and it's how to practice, which is a question that's ongoing for every artist, I think, and it has also been for UKS and for you.
And how to practice, of course, came about because I think, in part, in all the professionalization that has happened at UKS, the focus became these, monolithical solo exhibitions that I've already talked about how to, unfold or, unbuilt into, a different kind of processual work. But I think there was still this feeling on my part that, occasional minibars and the bigger solo shows didn't do the job in terms of actually, on an informal level, inviting artists or agents or, art historians or any kind of, professional in our or upcoming in our field into a conversation and having the conversation about how we practice.
I should say maybe that how to practice is a Monday morning workshop where some practitioner and there are artists, there are also historians or other people connected to art,
Yeah.
who give a personal account for an hour or so.
Yeah,
For-
it would
and
it
for-
would often go a little longer. So
Yeah.
so basically it was this idea that, you know, on a weekly basis, someone would come in Monday morning and start the work week.
And it
And-
engages, of course, the audience that would be the people who would need a space to go or a place to go to meet people to start their week, which is also a concern for some artists, I think, to how to structure the working day or the working week when there's the assumption is that there's like a lot of free time, open time. In practice, I find that it's filled with meetings and deadlines and stuff that hasn't been done yet. But it's still like there's still a possibility that you can set aside some time in the morning to get the week started.
Yeah, and I think that that's, you know, a uniquely difficult question for everyone. It's also difficult for me. You know, it's not. I learned everything about how I work by going, you know, attending the How to Practice every Monday morning, because of course it talked about procrastination, talked about sleep, talked about how much coffee do you drink, talked about when do you get your ideas. Is it walking your dog? Like what is 9 to 5? Like all of these questions of, you know, the runarounds of a practice, even to the level of bureaucracy, you know, exhibition applications, traveling the world, and all of these questions of how the fuck get this done, how live in it, which is, you know, completely different. It's idiosyncratic and it's very universal at the same time, because it's, you know, everyone deals with the solipsistic artistic practice in like going to your studio in different ways, but everyone needs a community to talk about that with. And that means and that's in a way how to understand that having a practice is also, you know, collective in its base. So to have this peer-to-peer conversation every Monday morning felt really necessary, and then I think it fulfilled one of the things that I have, you know, secretly always thought UKS as, or seen UKS as, namely the secret postgraduate program of Norway, the place where you come and have the conversations about how you work, how you practice, how to get up in the morning, which Netflix series do you watch, which are really inspiring, you know, what's the why Khalid? And then of course then it's again, you know, all these, I think the all these formats can, you know, work really well because they're Trojan horses to unlock, you know, different kinds of energies. And calling it How to Practice and making it a weekly thing also deformalized this idea of the artist talk. So I was super explicit, and Rodrigo, who worked really closely with me on it, and later Woodike taking over when I was on leave to work on a research project, super explicit about this not being, you know, the PowerPoint presentation you do at the big event. This would be the talk where you know, let down the guards. And it became this, you know, at times really odd kind of group therapy about blackouts or life crisis and, you know, all of these things that we all experience and that are not, you know, separable from the professional artistic practice, because it's all of that. And that's what we don't talk about so often. So in a way, you know, if the solo exhibition is this little weird, you know, pinnacle where you pop into visibility, there's 90% of the labor happening behind the scenes, and that's, god damn it, true to all the other practitioners in this field too. So of course we had curators come in, theater makers, like, you know, anyway, yeah, that was important to put on center stage.
Yeah, and this, I think, has been the defining part of your directorship, in a way, that the formal structure of the UKS program are these four solo exhibitions that sort of marks the time, or that delineates the year. But then what matters, I think, for everyone, like the members, everyone who are part of the community, especially for the staff who are here, and for the audience and the visitors and the participants. Then it's the practice or the day to day, and I'd like to thank you for how beautifully you've led this, which is in a way like you're saying, you're looking back to at 99 years of doing the same thing, but I think we didn't know that we were doing it in this explicit way. So
no.
I think we're at a good point to conclude.
Yeah.
And I think, do you have?
But can I just say thank you back? Because I think like how to practice. We should have mentioned I think plus 35 artists and practitioners that were part of that. Mention all the people who did mini bars, from Bikram's karaoke beer to Agatha's Club Lyre to Kunstverein from Amsterdam visiting us with their bar to speak about what a bar does for an institution, and so in a way all the people involved in Bandapart, you were actually part of one of the first mini bars. The artist institutions talk we had in the upstairs space right above where we sit, and so I think this is knitting together, and I like that lovely little feminist hint here, a program, and trying to make that spider web bounce and dance is only doable if so many people invest their energy. And of course the grateful thing here is that you guys can then actually pay these people. Everything is above board. There's a very beautiful, in that sense, also economical infrastructure to this, but that's just a tiny part, because really the energy comes from everyone who steps in the door and engages, and that's been amazing. And I'm eternally grateful to both UKS as an institution that have been that's taken me on. It's very fun to come and be the director of an institution that's so beloved, and that you end up in the heart of Oslo. But it's also a thanks to everyone involved. So that's really important to say.
Yes, the staff, of course, all the collaborators and the tech, and should say every single one of the 700 members. We should we should name their names more often. And I think now
I think that's a really, and I think that's one of the interesting things as well right now, because we're in this I'm stepping out of it, but there is this whole process happening right now of digging into the 100 years of or 99 years of history, soon 100, and that of course makes, I think, some of that infrastructure or the support structure that has carried this engine for so long much more visible. So it makes all the teams throughout time. It makes also the members and the people who were not allowed membership, the inclusions of this support structure really visible. And I think that's part of the danger in sort of a bigger concern. It's that institutions become invisible operators. They're very powerful, but they're invisible. And one of the things I've tried to do is to make our infrastructure more visible and relatable. And you can come and speak to me how to practice. I would be in dialogue with everyone, and I think that's something that's really, really valuable in the history digging as well.
One year to go now.
1 year to go.
Fireworks starts
Exactly.
for the 100 years.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I think, and we will certainly continue this this conversation. I hope for forever.
Yes, maybe not 100 years.
We'll see.
I don't know. Everyone's got a special.
But I think this would be the point where we would open up the field for questions from the audience. Now, of course, we're sitting here alone in the basement, but that means that as we would in front of an audience, we will sit here in awkward silence. until the technician here decides to pull the plug on the screen.
Yeah.
It's great talking to you, and I think there's much here for to continue conversations both within UKS and with Overgaten and in other contexts in the future.
Yeah, no, vice versa.
Yeah. So cue awkward silence.
Cue.
Maybe you should wave.
Maybe we wave. Yay!
I forgot to do the power pose before
Oh, we
started.
got the power pose. Oh my god, both the power pose and the. Oh yeah, we all and you never said your name, and I think I never said my name either.
I said
You
your
said
name.
my name.
I said Dr. Dall.
Oh, you said Dr. Dall. I will just. That's what I go by at this point.
Okay.
Okay, hey, we're done.
Yeah. Good job. Nice. Yeah. Good conversation. We can switch to our pan-Scandinavian pidgin now.
Exactly. Nu går vi tillbaka till någon märklig språk.